This morning's scripture reading is Colossians verses 1, or chapter 1, verses 13 and 14. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins.
It feels like you just saw me up here, didn't it? As has become my habit, as I get myself situated up here, I'm going to tell a little story, but that little story usually has music to it. So basically, I'm going to sing you a song. And it starts out with, "How old do you think I am?" he said. I said, "Well, I didn't know." He said, "I turned 65 about 11 months ago. I was sitting in Miami, pouring blended whiskey down, when this old gray black gentleman was cleaning up the lounge. There wasn't anyone around except this old man and me. The guy who ran the bar was watching Ironsides on TV. Uninvited, he sat down and opened up his mind on old dogs and children and watermelon wine. You ever had a drink of watermelon wine?" he asked. He told me all about it, though I didn't answer back. Ain't but three things in this world that's worth a solitary dime, but old dogs and children and watermelon wine. He said, "Women think about themselves when menfolk ain't around, and friends are hard to find when they discover that you're down." He said, "I tried it all when I was young and in my natural prime. Now it's old dogs and children and watermelon wine. Old dogs care about you even when you make mistakes. God bless little children while they're still too young to hate." When he moved away, I found my pen and copied down that line about old dogs and children and watermelon wine. Well, I had to catch a plane up to Atlanta that next day. And as I left for my room, I saw him picking up my change. That night I dreamed in peaceful sleep of shady summertime and old dogs and children and watermelon wine. I'm sure you're asking, what in the world does that have to do with anything? You'll see. How did we get here today? A few weeks ago, when Brad said that he and Marion were traveling and they would need someone to step up and take over the message, I told him, I'll step in. I've got one in mind. And this was 2, 3, 4 weeks ago now. And I had told myself at the time, I am going to do a lesson on the heroes of the Bible. It sounded so good in my head. The heroes of the Bible. I was thinking, okay, well, we can talk about Samson. We can talk about David. We can talk about Noah. We can talk about Moses. We can even talk about Esther if we want to. It sounded good. Everything was there. I had all this material. And then I started thinking, I've got all this scripture I can throw in. We can quote from A to Z, from Amos to Zephaniah. We can go from Matthew to Revelation. We can go to Lamentations to Habakkuk. But the problem is, the more I talked about it, the more I thought about it, the more complicated it was getting. And I had this little voice in my head, that little Jiminy Cricket voice that keeps telling you, you're going the wrong way, you're going the wrong way, you're going the wrong way. I kept on going. I said, we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and I'm going to send Manuel a PowerPoint, and it's going to be the greatest, most spectacular lesson in the history of history. And I said, Darren, but I wasn't listening. I said, everybody's going to love it. They're going to be dancing in the aisles. It's going to be awesome. And the voice said, Darren, what? Keep it simple. What kind of advice is that? Keep it simple. Keep it simple. But the more I thought about it, the more I saw the lesson falling apart, because I was trying to do too much. I was thinking too much. And once again, the more agitated I got, that voice came in again. It said, Darren, will you stop interrupting me? But I have something to tell you. What? And I thought it might be something inspirational, something scriptural, like Philippians 4, where it says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and pleading with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. But that's not what the little voice in my head told me. Once again, it told me 3 little words. Keep it simple. So all of a sudden, that became my mantra as I went through the week after week after week. Keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it simple. But then I got busy. Everyone in here at one time or another has had something lined out, something ready to go, and then they get busy, they get sidetracked. Well, that's what happens when you have so much else going on. You have what's supposed to be a 40-hour work week turn into 72 hours. It's hard to stay on track. But I started thinking, keep it simple. I started thinking about the simple things in life and how life seemed to be easier before technology made life easier for us. But you think about it now, everything is bigger, everything is better. By better, they also mean more expensive, more complicated, and harder to fix when it breaks. You think about the cars. Anybody who buys a new car, they can't fix it. Heck, half the time we can't even get it to start because there's nowhere to put the key. My dad has an Equinox. First time I sat in it, he gave me the key fob. There was the fob, but there was no key. I sat in it. There was no hole for the key. Just press the brake, hit the button. That's not simpler. TVs have become more simple, more smart. They have smart houses. You have people bragging, I can just use my telephone and turn on the TV from my bedroom into the other room. But why? You're not even in there to watch it. And don't get me started on smartphones. They will do everything in the world. And smart watches, and I apologize for anybody wearing a smart watch today. But I work with all of these 20-somethings that they have all these fancy watches. And they say, well, it can keep monitoring my heart rate, and it can keep monitoring the steps I take, and it takes my blood pressure, and it knows the temperature, and it does all this. And you ask them, but does it tell time? That's my watch. I bought it from JCPenney 20 years ago. All it does is tell me time. That's all I need a watch for. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. But people think that they need the fancy stuff. People think that they need the newest technology. But we need to learn to separate our wants from our needs. We do not need the fancy phones. We do not need everything in our house set up on Alexa where we can go into any room and say, Alexa, do this, Alexa, do that. That is a want. That is not a need. We always say, God, I need this. And God looks down, he says, you do not need what you're asking for. He knows the difference between our wants and our needs, but we don't. We want what everybody else has. And I will get to that in a little bit, but we need to separate our wants from our needs. And someone will always ask, well, where in the Bible does it talk about possessions, and where in the Bible does it talk about having too much? Well, I did come up with a few examples, like Matthew 6:19 through 21, where it says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also. Too much materialism. Matthew 6:30 through 33 says, but if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Do not worry then, saying, what are we to eat? What are we to drink? Or what are we to wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided to you. But we've become so consumed with what we have. But one thing I've noticed is we become driven by what we have. We let our possessions possess us. And that's one of those things, if you want to lead a simple life, don't let your possessions possess you. Be happy what you have. And I am so glad we have, I'm not going to say an older bunch here today because older is always kind of a negative statement, but I have a more mature congregation, except for you young men. But I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, trying to keep up with the Joneses. Be happy with what you have and don't try to keep up with the Joneses. Let them have what they have. Just have what you need. Know the difference between what you need and what you want. And live a simple life. There's an old saying, another one of those old sayings, if it's not broke, there's no need to fix it. I go back to the whole smartphone craze. Every year, our friends at the Apple company come out with a new iPhone. Every year you hear it advertised, oh, the iPhone 17 is out. Well, I just figured out how to open the box for my iPhone 16. Why do I need an iPhone 17? Because it's better. How is it better? Because it's new. That didn't answer my question. They kick out generation after generation after generation of these products. But can anybody actually prove what has changed within the last year of production that makes this phone better than the phone you have now? Manuel, you're a technical person. You're my computer guy. Do you know the difference between 1 year of phone and another? And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but you're smarter than me.
They claim it's faster, better. Who knows?
Well, the Bionic Man was faster and better, but they didn't put out a new one every year. Be happy with what you have. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And if you want to lead a happy life, lead a simple life. Some of the little tips for leading a simple life, leading a happy life, is don't create your own struggles. A lot of times we are our own worst enemies. Instead of looking for what is right or what is good, we think about what can go wrong. We overthink things. We create our own storms and then complain about the rain. Look for what's good. Just like earlier, look for the silver lining. Look for what can be right. Don't worry about what can go wrong. Because God will take care of it before it can go wrong. And if it does go wrong, He will still take care of it. We need to learn how to keep the short story short. Because sometimes if you start talking, the more you talk, the more complicated the story gets. Keep it short, keep it simple. We need to learn how to not make mountains out of a molehill. Another one of those old sayings I love. Don't make it worse than it has to be. And sometimes if life gets too busy, we need to just step back. Things get too complicated, things get too involved. Step back. Observe what's going on. Think before you talk. Think before you act. Because the more you think, the more complicated it gets. But just give it a little bit of thought. And sometimes life gets going too fast. Sometimes we just need to slow down. You can enjoy life at your own pace. You don't have to keep up with everybody else. Unless you're on the interstate in Denver, and then you kind of have to keep up with everybody else, so you get run over. But everything, it seems, they try to complicate it. They call it new, but all they do is complicate things. I am a very musical person, and I love the old music. I love old Motown. I love music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, back when it was simple. And there is nothing wrong with simplicity. If people say, you listen to that old stuff? Yeah, I do. I can understand it. I can appreciate it. It's simple. How many of you are familiar with the name Red Sovine? I knew Dad would have to know. Red Sovine, he was an old singer from, I have to say, the 50s or the 60s. He sang a lot of the truck driving songs. But when I talk about simple things, it can be simple, but it can be heartfelt, and it can be beautiful. There was a song by Red Sovine called Little Rosa. And he had this deep storytelling voice. And he said, I was going to visit the grave of a friend of mine. And as I walked through the graveyard, I noticed a man kneeling by the grave of a child. And in his hand, he held a big red rose, and tears were streaming down his cheeks. So I walked over, laid a hand on his shoulder, and started to talk to him. And the story he told me through his broken English was this. He said, I was walking down the street today and I passed by a big flower shop. I walk into the flower shop and I ask the man, boss, how much for one red rose? And he looked at me with one big frown and he said, for you, $1. Oh, but a buy and a buy. a swell-dressed blonde young lady walked in, and she asked the man how much for one red rose. And he looked at her with one big smile, and he said, "For you, 10 cents." And I said, "Boss, how come you charge me $1 for a rose and only charge the young lady 10 cents? And he looked at me and he says, "Look, mister, you tell me why you want the rose, and maybe I'll give it to you for naught." And he said, "Boss, I'm a hard-working man. I work for the railroad and only make 10 cents a day. And I got a little girl at home. Her name is Rosa. I come home every day, and Rosa comes running to me, and she throws her arms around my leg and says, 'Papa.' And I say, 'Rosa?' 'Oh, but boss, one day I come home and I didn't see my Rosa. I look down by the tracks and I see one big crowd. And I run down and I push the crowd this way, and I push the crowd that way. And there, laying at my feet, was my little Rosa. So that's why I want the rose, boss. I want to lay it on her grave.' And the man, he said nothing, but he picked out the biggest and reddest rose and handed it to me. And I said, 'Thank you, boss. Thank you so much.' And though she's gone, you see, she's still the world to me. To me, she'll always be that little girl of mine." You see what I mean? Simple, but effective. You don't need a lot of synthesized noises in the background. You don't need a lot of fancy lyrics. Just words from the heart to the heart. And it tugs at those heartstrings. But no matter what the music is, just enjoy it. Now, when it comes to worship, during class this morning, Dennis was talking about seeing the salaries of some preachers making millions of dollars. That does not make a preacher. You see all of these, what they call mega churches. You do not need a church the size of a basketball arena. You do not need the lasers. You do not need the smoke machines. You do not need the fancy bands behind you giving you all the music. Keep it small. Keep it simple. And once again, someone will say, "Well, where does it say the worship has to be simple, smart guy?" Just look at John 4:15 through 26. The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so I will not be thirsty, nor come all the way here to draw water." And he said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said to him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have correctly said, 'I have no husband.' For you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you have now is not your husband. This which you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and yet you Jews say that that Jerusalem is the place where one must worship." Jesus said to her, "Believe me, woman, that a time is coming when you shall worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, because salvation is from the Jews. But a time is coming, and even now has arrived, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people, the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, or he who calls himself Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us. And Jesus said to her, I am he, the one speaking to you. So you don't need the big churches. You don't need the big congregations. You don't need the millions of dollars. It doesn't matter where you are, but you need three things. You need faith, you need heart, and you need the Bible. Keep it simple. And any simple life has many simple days. We all need that simple day. A little prayer in the morning, a couple of Bible verses throughout the day, maybe a walk with the dogs. I know I used to see Dennis walk his dog by my house every day. That's part of the simple but happy day. Once again, I will ask you another question, and hopefully I'll get at least one hand raised this time. Have any of you ever heard of Jim Valvano? Jimmy Valvano. He was a basketball coach in the early 1980s. He led the North Carolina, I believe they are the Wolfpack. He led them to the NCAA National Championship in 1983. A little bit later down the line, he developed cancer. And they created what they called the Jimmy V Foundation. It was for cancer research. On March 4th, 1993, they had a show called the ESPYs. It was an award show created by ESPN, and it honored Jimmy Valvano. March 4th, 1993, Jimmy Valvano gave a speech. And just a couple key parts of the speech. Near the end, I think the producers were telling him, you need to wrap up, we're running late on time. And he said, I know I've got to go. I've got to go. And I've got one last thing. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Cancer can take away all my physical abilities, but it cannot touch my mind. It cannot touch my heart. And it cannot touch my soul. And those three things are going to carry on forever. I thank you, and God bless you all. That speech was given by Jimmy Valvano on the 4th of March, 1993. Jimmy Valvano passed away April 28th. Little over a month after that, he passed. But it's the simple things. Your heart, your soul, your mind. We're all blessed with them. But I was talking about a simple day, and a couple of things you need in that simple day are prayer and reading the Bible. But another thing I've always taken from Jimmy Valvano's speech, he talked about 3 daily actions, 3 things, 3 simple things that make a day complete. Number 1 is you have to laugh. You have to find something to laugh at that makes you laugh and brings joy into your day. The number 2 thing is just to think. Spend some time in deep thought. Engage your mind. And the 3rd thing is to cry. Allow your emotions to move you to tears. whether it's from happiness or sadness. If you do those three things, you laugh, you think, and you cry, you have had a complete yet simple day. You don't have to complicate your life. You don't have to worry about how much you have compared to how much the other people have. You don't have to worry about how many people are in the seats at the church. Because you can have 2,000 people in there, but if they don't have the faith, then they're just there. Be happy with what you have. Be happy with who you have. Take joy in the little things, the simple things, the family that surrounds you, the friends that surround you. Yes, we may shed tears at times, but it reminds us that we can feel pain. Or on the bright side of the tears, it reminds us that we can shed tears of happiness. It reminds us that we are gifted. Even though we may not realize it, even though we may take it for granted. Every sunrise in the east is a gift. Every sunset in the evening, that beautiful sunset we have here, is a gift. We see it every day, but quite often we don't notice. But it's just one of those simple things we need to pay attention to. Your mind may become cluttered, your day may become hectic, your life may become busy. And sometimes all of that gets going on in your life may get in the way of your final destination. Sometimes we may slip. Sometimes we may go off path. But there is always redemption. There is always baptism. And the water is always ready. So as we stand and sing this hymn of invitation,